What's up, YouTube friends? Today I have Connor, who is a travel nurse himself, and I'm really excited to have him on. He actually used to be a former student, and he's going to talk about what he actually learned in the class, but he's also going to be talking about some of the most important things that he sees in the travel medical industry with the stipend, what they get paid, and the best ways to go about finding a property for travel medical professionals. So I hope you guys are excited. Please like and subscribe to this page. This is a lot of information that we're getting from a professional himself. So check this out. I really wanted you guys, the reason why I have Connor on is because he's actually a travel medical professional, and I'm always talking about travel medical professionals. So I really wanted everybody watching on YouTube to really understand the perspective from an actual medical professional themselves. It's an actual nurse that's in the field on the day-to-day working on the floors. And Connor not only is a nurse, but he's also an investor in real estate, and he's holding some pretty big projects that he's got working on right now. So Connor, first off, I want to dive in. Thanks for coming on here, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
So tell me a little bit about what the travel industry, the medical industry looks like now. Let's talk a little bit about pre-COVID and how it looks now as far as how busy it is. And if you've noticed anything changing in the actual medical field as far as nursing.
Sure. So pre-COVID, I did not travel nurse. However, from the information that I've gathered, it was still fairly lucrative compared to what most staff nurses were making around the country outside of high cost of living areas like California and New York. Once COVID hit, it kind of, I think, changed a little bit of the healthcare system because we were seeing a mass influx of patients coming into the hospitals, and a lot of hospitals, there's always been a shortage of nurses, but it was kind of accepted that, this is what nurses make, and sure, travel nurses can make a little bit more based on the stipends that they receive, which I can talk about a little bit later. But now that we're seeing this huge influx of patients, they're trying to keep up with the normal day-to-day things or patient populations that they manage. You're seeing these hospitals fight for essentially for people to take care of either COVID patients or the patients that come out of surgery. And there simply was not enough. So you saw this huge influx in essentially what travel nurses made. So the shortage, there's always been a shortage of nurses. And now hospitals are fighting for the limited amount that there were. So you're seeing these huge rates during peak COVID times being up to 10,000 a week. A lot of these numbers, I'll break down the numbers in a second. With that 10,000 a week, that's an advertisement. That's not actually what people actually made. That depended on their tax home and where they were working and the need of the hospitals in that particular area. But anyways, up to $10,000 a week. So all these hospitals were fighting over nurses to take care of these patients. A lot of staff nurses were doing the same amount of work, and they started hearing how much travel nurses were making. So they quit their jobs, creating even more of a shortage.
Right.
So
plus the vaccine mandates, nurses were, there's a lot of nurses that were running away from that. So you have a combination of all these things at the same time. And I don't know what states have those mandates. I think California, I'm not sure if we're still mandated here or not. And you're not in California. Where are you at, by the way?
Physically, I am in California right now.
Oh, you are.
But I have been in North Carolina and Illinois and Southern California, Northern California, a couple other states as well. So
got you.
I've been able to see over a variety of patient populations across COVID or the COVID times, and
right
where I'm at specifically in California, COVID is stabilizing, at least in terms of that in the ICU that I am in. There are still patients who are in the ICU with COVID, but there are essentially many of the hospitals now are competing for nurses because they are not adequately staffed to take care of their normal patient populations. There's still massive contracts out there where you can make $10,000 a week, and those hospitals, even though they're not getting hit with COVID, they have no staff because that's their staff left to go take those assignments.
So essentially the staff that's here is leaving to take travel assignments.
Yeah. So
because they're making. So let's break that down real quick. I want to kind of dive into this. I know this is not a nursing, how much do nurses make channel, but I just want to give perspective. First off, it's a ton of work, and I appreciate you for being in there. I mean, you guys work some crazy ass hours, and you put your, I remember when I worked in the healthcare industry and COVID first hit, we had nurses that were doing home health that refused to go see patients. Like they were, and there was only a handful of nurses that were like, I'll go do it. We had a COVID team that went out and did it. And I know that you work in the ICU. That's primarily what you do, correct?
that's correct.
That's correct. So I know that there's an ICU to patient ratio or nurse to patient ratio, which in California I think is 1 to 3 patients. Am I correct on that in the ICU? Or is it
So
1 to 2?
it's 1 to 2.
1 to 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So that's essentially what I'm seeing. So in the Bay Area right now, and I've talked to several people that work for like Highland Hospital, UCSF, some of the bigger hospitals have mentioned like, yeah, we actually have staff here that are leaving to go take travel medical positions because, Joe and Sally are making, almost 2x of what a traditional nurse would make in those markets. So can you tell us, break that down when you say 10,000 a week, what that looks like? And for those of you watching right now, nurses get a hourly rate or a salary rate. Most of the time, I believe it's hourly, right? Right, Connor? And then they also get a stipend, and that stipend is lodging, is per diem rate, basically lodging, meals, and there might be some other stuff in there. Maybe we can break that down in a second. But that's essentially what nurses pay when they're going to stay at one of our properties. But I've actually reworked that, and we have agencies that are paying, but we also still host travel medical professionals that are paying out of their pocket. So let's dive into that real quick, Connor. What does that stipend actually look like? And when they say $10,000 a week, what does that actually mean?
So $10,000 a week is broken down into hourly, overtime, and stipend. The stipend varies depending on where you are living in the country, and the government decides that. There are agencies that will fudge the numbers and pay a nurse $20 an hour and give them some outrageous untaxed stipend. And on the front end to the nurse who, I mean, this is a whole nother subset of things, but that is usually not the way to go because it's harder to get loans that way. And it also is tax fraud. It's straight up illegal. And
right.
if the nurse gets audited, they will get into trouble. There's a website, I think it's like GSW or something like that, where it's a government website that specifically breaks down the maximum allowable stipend for a nurse or any per diem worker based on that location. So the agency can give up to that amount of money based on the location the nurse is in. Then whatever the difference is their hourly and their overtime rate. Some of these $10,000 a week jobs is like if you're working 6 12-hour shifts a week, which some assignments you have to do. So sure, like there's quite a few jobs that I could think of that if you work 6 12-hour days in a row, you might be able to make $10,000. But it's not like working 40 hours a week, sitting at your computer. There's a lot of training and things that went into that career profession on the back or on the front end to get to that point. And then also they're still actually physically at a hospital doing what I would think is high level things in an ICU to keep literally your family members alive, to earn that dollar amount. And then also then you get hit with taxes. So taxes, obviously, you're not taking home $10,000 a week. You're going to get hit with taxes, and depending on the state that you reside in, which is you're essentially at the mercy of their tax code. And that is one of the reasons why real estate is really, really good to get into. Essentially, one of the ways that I have been able to essentially control my own tax situation through real estate is utilizing the real estate professional status. That is a whole nother topic, which we can touch on as much or as little as you want. But essentially, when you're able to accumulate enough real estate or show that you're involved enough in real estate, you can figure out ways, if you have a good CPA, to pay little to no taxes, which is extremely important. Most people don't realize that their rent or their mortgage is not their most expensive bill every year. It is their tax bill. And if you can control that, you can really you can get out of nursing if you want. You can do it for fun. You can do it every day of the week if you want, but it really allows you the options, which is why you have to do both. There's not really.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And one of the things too is, thankfully, and with hard work, you have a high paying job. So that you're essentially right. You're being taxed more than anything. So you need to make sure that you're moving those funds into something that is going to bring you cash flow, but that also is tax deductible at the end of the day. That's what you need to have, multiple streams of income. We all know that already, which is fantastic that you're doing, by the way. So what is an actual per diem rate? What does that look like? What's that look like as far as, is it lodging? Is it, and what do you see that being allocated to? Like, say somebody's going to book an Airbnb or rent a place. Like, what is acceptable amount that most people get? Is there? I know every assignment's different too. For every clinician, it's different. So can you kind of break down the stipend and what that looks like in the per diem rate?
Well, the per diem rate is dependent on where you are in the country,
Mhm.
and based on that website. There are some agencies that will fudge that and give a nurse a higher per diem rate than what is actually allowed by law.
Mhm.
The highest that I've heard of for a per diem untaxable rate is around $2,100 a week to untaxed.
Wow.
That's the
Wow.
highest that I've heard of. So most is not that. Those are in areas like the Bay Area and New York City. Most
Gotcha.
is not going to be that. Most is going to be like uh, probably between 1,000 and 1,500 a week, which is still a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um,
Perfect. And that
yeah.
makes sense. So you being in the travel world, um, and I talk about this all the time in my classes, the relationship between a recruiter and a nurse. How big of a role does that play when you're actually going into an assignment? How's that relationship look?
I mean, some recruiters and some nurses are better than others, just like any job. And then uh, for me, I usually deal with my recruiter when I'm either in between assignments or renegotiating a contract. Outside of that, I don't really talk to them. I
Mhm.
think she's fine, but there's just no reason to.
You're not
No
going to
reason.
call up and be like, "Hey, buddy,
Yeah.
you want to go grab a beer?" You're not going to do any of that stuff. All right, cool. That makes sense. Okay, perfect. So, and again, because one of my, you obviously being in the class, like you realize, like, that's super important for us as real estate investors, that we need to eventually connect with the recruiters to build that rapport. Because it's essentially, at the end of the day, they want to place you in a position just as much as you want to get placed with a salary that makes sense and that assignment that makes sense for you. So ultimately, it's a win-win kind of relationship at the end of the day. So I'm gonna kind of change this around now. So now that you've taken the class and you kind of started implementing some of these things that I talk about in the class, um, you're on the forefront. So have you been able to reach out and connect with recruiters? Have you been able to connect with travelers that are coming from different markets? Have you been able to find out what agencies they're working with? Kind of tell us about what projects you have going on and then what that looks like,
Yeah.
about as far as reaching out.
So in terms of reaching out, I have not gone super like full speed ahead into reaching out to HR and like to agencies. I did reach out to the agency that I worked for, to their housing department. I didn't have any luck. So I've had most of my luck has come from Airbnb and Furnish Finder.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, and to be honest with you about essentially what makes it so that it's lucrative is the actual property that you purchase. It's not who you rent it to, and it's not. Well, sometimes it's the length of stay that can help, but essentially it's the purchase of the property and what you can do with it or what you can't do with it. Renting to travel nurses is good because they have a strong income and they have a pretty decent background, and they're gonna they have the money to pay. But uh, the actual acquisition of the property is where you're gonna make or lose money, and that's kind of the combination of like what I learned in your class, and then also what I did previously allowed me to do that. So, but Furnish Finder and Airbnb is where I've had most success so far.
Got you. So when you're connecting with people on Furnish Finder, are you, essentially data mining, grabbing information? So you're not full out going out and grabbing, trying to go after the contract. You're just right now at this moment, because you still have a pretty strenuous W-2 day job or night job, depending on what your shifts are. So you're not actively looking for that. So what kind of deals are you in now? Like, what are you looking at, and how are you determining what's a good property to purchase based off of the long-term rent, off the midterm model, and off the short-term model?
So for the properties that I have now, I always look for property that I can change, or unique properties. So the first two are both three and a half townhomes in the same townhome community. And it's built on a hill, so it has a walkout basement. So what I did with that is I essentially put a kitchen and a laundry in the basement, and I made it a duplex. I have two of those exact same floor plans. So I essentially bought a single family home for 200 grand. I have
Mhm.
two of those, and then those rent for 5,000 each a month.
That's freaking awesome.
Because I
Two,
did short-term rental, I did short-term or midterm rentals, and I made them duplexes. So that cost me like 5 or 10 grand to put in a kitchen and a laundry. And now now it's a midterm lease, so I don't have to deal with cleaners and all this stuff. That's something that I've learned since your classes. That sometimes, I mean, for me, it's hard to automate and like take my mind fully off of, because I work a lot of hours at my W-2, and there's a lot more when there's more moving parts, whether it's a fancy car or a fancy house or a short-term rental, there's just more things that can go wrong. So I take a little bit less money, but then I don't have to think about it for 3 months. And
yeah.
I also made a lot more money by making it a duplex instead of a single family home, for example, in that situation or in that scenario.
So the duplexes are making 5 grand each side, or 2,500 each side?
25 each side, but I have two.
25 each side.
But I
Two of
have
them,
two.
perfect.
Yeah.
So I mean, your mortgage on 200 grand at 20% down is probably only like 800 or 900 bucks,
Yeah.
1,100 maybe.
Yeah.
So you're cash flowing probably about 3,500
Mhm.
a month just off of those two places. That is so awesome, man.
Mhm.
And that's where, what would if you were to rent those out long term, what would you get for long term?
I mean, rented out long term. I was renting them room to room because I house hacked those, and then
Got you.
I was essentially making like 2,400 a month for the whole thing,
For the entire
including
thing.
when I was not living in it, because I rented out 3 rooms individually, and now I rent
Got you.
it as a two and a half, and as a 1 separate units.
Got you. So you've been able to basically 2x what you would typically get from long-term renters.
Mhm.
Got you. So have you tried using any of those properties as Airbnb or as short-term rentals?
I can't use those as short-term rentals because those are in an HOA. So never buy an HOA. That's
Yeah.
less
That's,
than those were my first homes, so I didn't really
yeah.
know. But the midterm model works great because again, the purchase price. It all goes back to making it so that your numbers work for multiple situations. And also, those properties have gone up in equity like 100K each in like 2 years.
Yeah.
So
What state are you what state are you investing in? Or is this
I only do North Carolina.
North Carolina? Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's actually, that area is one of the places that I talk about having one of the highest nursing shortages, and you can look this stuff and go on Google and look at it. That state has one of the highest besides California, Texas, Florida. I think Illinois is another one.
Mhm.
So you're seeing a pretty strong influx in travel medical professionals coming into those markets. And are
Mhm.
you close to hospitals?
Yeah, I mean, all the houses that I own are within 10 minutes of level 1 trauma centers.
Got you. So that is important to make sure that you're buying within the 10 or 15-minute drive to the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. It also depends on like just where would you want to live? Like your job or your work isn't necessarily the only thing you do. So like you want to be close to things and stuff like that. That's the commute to work is important, but also I'm like 5 or 10 minutes to downtown too. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I look at it.
Connor, I love that you brought that up, because this question, and you probably have people that reach out to you, and as you an investor probably you're asked the same question. I always have people asking me like, where do I buy a property? What do I need to do? I mean, you just nailed it right now. You're a travel nurse. Like, what are you looking for when you're gonna go, on assignment somewhere? Like, what kind of property? Because there's a million of them, right? You get to choose which one you want. So what are you choosing? Like, is it everything you just described right now? Is that's essentially how you find a property? Is you kind of you are in those shoes. You are doing these things on a day to day. So what are you looking for exactly?
Like in terms of an investment or where I personally live or
Yeah. So like if you're on assignment, what are you looking for to go? And is your investment style very similar to where you would rent if you were to go to an assignment, let's just say in like, the Midwest somewhere?
yeah. So uh, this I am an investor and a nurse. So
Right.
I try to save every dollar that I can.
Yeah.
I will find the nicest place for the least amount of money. That's kind of how I go about it. And that's um and I do think, I think creatively too. Like sometimes I will offer, I'll put things on forums that are like essentially like the Hollywood of certain areas. I'll find a way to get into so there's like Craigslist or Nextdoor. That's kind of
Right.
how I get into those communities. And I post up that I'm a travel nurse and that I'm in the area, and that I'll like feed their cats when they're out of town or something. And I get a lot of hits. And 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 that's kind of how I go about it, because I value every dollar that I don't spend on rent, I invest into real estate. So that's kind of my strategy in terms of how I like buy investment properties. It's the same kind of deal. Like I'll look at what's available and I'll just make it better. Like it's not hard. Most people are not, I mean, most people, and this is maybe, I don't know, take it as you will. Most people are not, most people are average by the definition. So if you can beat out 50% of how people decorate their Airbnb, or how people, do in school, or do at their job or whatever, like that's good. You have a better chance of getting your place rented, or getting a higher grade, or making more money, or whatever your goal is. It's not hard to not be average if you put in a little effort.
I totally agree, man. I think that it comes with personality. You have to have that persistent, gritty personality to want to do more and beat somebody out. And it's competitive in a way. I think you have to have that. Especially, I think for me, when I have Airbnbs and things, I want to be the 10% in my market. I'm sure that you're probably, I mean, Connor, I talked to Connor. He's like, I'm going to go get my real estate license. I'm going to become a broker. I'm going to get a property management. Like, dude, you're like 100% go when I talk to you, like, and I'm like, I think I had to talk you out of doing a couple things. I'm like, Connor, wait, hang on, slow down, man. So, but I think you have to have that drive in order to really, really be successful at stuff. Like you have to be obsessed with it. Really, you do. Like, honestly, at the end of the day. And, I see, those things in you. And I saw that really early on. So I think it's great that you're putting the effort in and that you're thinking that way. And that's obviously the mentality you have. Because again, you're right. A lot of the average people don't have that, but everybody watching right now wants to do more and to understand more and to educate themselves, because at the end of the day, we have to educate ourselves before we get compensated with what we're doing. It's just how it works. That's how society works. That's how it's always been with everything. Whether you don't have a high school diploma or you have a college education, you have to educate yourself in some sort, one way or another, to make something happen. So, all right. So let's kind of dive into this real quick. So investment properties that you're looking at, you're only going to buy within a 10 or 15-minute radius. What would you tell people now that are looking to invest in into the midterm market? You as a travel nurse, like what are like 3 big tips that you would say, here's what I would do if I was going to invest in one of these markets?
Well, I would say before you invest, learn the market, because once you buy something, you're in it. There's a lot of money until you're in it for a little bit of time that you will lose if you made the wrong decision. So you need to educate yourself. That's probably number one.
So what does that mean? Let's break that down real quick. What does educate yourself in that market mean? Like, what are you doing when you're educating yourself in a market?
Look at like essentially population growth, what hospitals are there, what other things are there. Why would you want to live there, or why would you not want to live there? Crime rates. Never buy in like a war zone because it's a good deal. It doesn't matter.
Right.
There's a lot of war zones where I invest, but I don't invest in them. That's just
Right.
like the nature of those areas. There's on one side of town you have good deals and like shootings every day, and then on the other side of town it's a little bit more expensive and your numbers will be a little bit worse, but you'll get way more appreciation and then you'll have better tenant quality. So again, coming back, where would I want to live? That's, I guess, one. And then also you need to have options with like what you do with it. Like if it doesn't work as a midterm, what? Like, do you have to sell it for like essentially $20,000 of loss because you have to put it back on the market so quick so it doesn't appreciate? Or like what, or can you make it a long-term rental and make it a duplex or whatever? Like you have to have different ideas. Like, again, what I did, I made 2 townhomes into duplexes because
Creative.
of or whatever. I have a property that has a 2.5 house on it, a 1 cottage on it on a 1/2 acre, and I'm going to build another ADU on it and put in a trailer. So that's 40, that's a
Smart.
flex on one property. And I got that for 190 within 10 minutes of a level 1 trauma center. And those,
So good.
and those rent between $2,000 and $3,000 a month each. Another thing is, it's really tough, but try to establish income yourself, because if, for example, if nobody paid me rent this month, I would be able to live my own life and cover all the mortgages myself. I'm not at a point, do not stretch yourself thin, because if you mess up your credit or make your first deal is a bad one, it takes a long time to fix that. So there,
Recovery, yeah.
you need to like, I mean, everyone, don't sit on the sidelines, get in the game, but make sure that your income, your W-2 income, which is where most people start, is strong enough so that in a bad situation where you lost your job or like your first deal wasn't the best, that you can recover without something substantial or like really catastrophic happening. So I guess those would be the 3 or more tips.
I'm gonna add a tip to that too. Don't buy dumb shit, which means don't go spend your money on like, flashy things or these expensive ass cars and stuff that's going to depreciate, even though we do have a car chip shortage, which vehicles right now are going up like crazy. But people are doing that. And I think that you gotta, if you put yourself in the right perspective now, 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, you can have that nice stuff. But now it's like you really got, and I think that's what you're doing. Like you're really focusing on, where your income is going, what it's going to generate for you now, but also looking longer term, 10 years down the road, because real estate is a long-term game, you guys. It's not short-term. It is a long-term game, unless you're a flipper or whatnot. But traditionally, real estate was meant to be long-term, right? So, that's a perspective that I think sometimes people forget. We are very momentary type people. Especially with the economy the way it is, we have cell phones. We check our cell phones over 400 times a day. What the average person literally looks at their phone over 400 times a day. So our attention spans are literally like, this big. So, I think that you're absolutely right on that. Going back to one of the biggest tip that you can give somebody right now. I know that you just gave a couple tips, but by buying, under market, being able to find something, being in the travel healthcare world, I talk about contracts often, being able to connect with agencies, getting a contract, or connecting with recruiters. How do you see that connecting going forward in the future? And I know right now, maybe I'm even talking about this a little bit too much, but there has just been a government policy that's not in effect yet, but they're talking about capping the prices on travel medical professionals. And this is not actually to cap how much you're going to make, Connor. This is actually a cap on the agencies that are doing things illegally. Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about that going on right now?
Yeah, so I've heard about that. And there's, you see your friends post on Instagram about like, don't cap travel nurses, cap CEOs and all this stuff. At the end of the day, yes, I've heard about it. I personally don't think that that's going to really work or go through, because the market, it's a supply and demand thing. Like the agency, sure, you can say the agencies can only charge $400 an hour. The hospitals charge patients, we'll say in this example, $400 an hour. The agency will charge $200 an hour and pay the nurse $100 an hour and keep 50% profit. If they cap it, then the agency will just pay the nurse less, and then the nurse will just leave. So it's going to be a supply and demand thing. It's basic economics. You can try to cap. Why don't you cap plumbers, or why don't you cap electricians? At the end of the day, people need their mothers and fathers and loved ones taken care of. And that can, if there's nobody to take care of someone after surgery, they're not going to have surgery. They're going to continue living with whatever condition they're living with. And if nurses go back to making what they've made before, they'll just quit and find something else to do there's a lot of hard work and a lot of stuff that nurses have to do that people would never do in their life, even though we get paid for it. So, people say it's not fair because they probably are jealous that they hear like, oh, they're making 10,000 a week. All you do is like hand out Tylenols. It's like, okay, well, next time you're in the hospital, I'll just give you Tylenol. If that's what you think that my job is.
You're in pain. We're not going to give you any Dilaudid. Here's a 500 milligram Tylenol, and
Yeah.
here's some ibuprofen.
Yeah. So I mean, yes, long story long, I guess I have heard about it. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't really understand the inner workings of what's going on politically with it, but I don't think that they're going to be able to do it really, because people will it's going to be a supply and demand thing. It'll come down to that. People will leave and then they have to pay that amount. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what I was reading is that it wasn't even necessarily about the nurses at all. It was about the agencies that were charging. You said it earlier. So they're paying a nurse $20 an hour, but then giving them this other amount of stipend, which is illegal. So, and then the companies are now telling the hospital that they're paying you $45 an hour when in actuality they're only paying you $20 an hour.
Yeah.
So that's what they're actually trying to cap. It has nothing to do with the salaries of the healthcare professionals, the nurses, or the traveling doctors. Yeah. I'll have to do a little more deep dive on that, which I agree with you. I don't think it'll pass, but Connor, if it does pass, I think there's going to be a lot of potential still for people that own properties, because just like with anything, if there's an imbalance with it, the economy will recover itself. And just what I mean by that is, if there's an agency that says, "Oh, sorry, we can't pay you this much anymore, Connor, but we're going to be able to give you housing stipend now that's going to go higher, or we're going to pay for your housing now." Guess what that does for us investors?
Yeah,
that's where opportunity is. And I think that through dislocation, a lot of disadvantages, there's a lot of opportunity that falls into that. We're seeing that with COVID, people that invested in the stock market back in March of 2020.
Yeah,
people that are investing now, we're potentially going into a war, another war, and the stock market is going crazy. We're getting there. There's opportunities that are coming in front of us right now. It's up to us to make that decision if this is something we're going to do or not. Yeah. And I really feel that with the travel industry, the travel medical industry, that there's opportunity in these specific things. And again, there's just not enough travel medical professionals. There's really not. And you know this, like you realize how important the need is and how probably understaffed you guys are in a lot of these hospitals. What are you working on right now? What's on the forefront for 2022?
So 2022, I really want my goal is to buy one house a year, or that was my goal to start. And in 2019, when I bought my first house, I bought one. And in 2020, I didn't get any. And then in 2021, I got 3. This year, I want to get 6. But most of those are going to happen on the back end between August and December, most likely, because I have to, I'm essentially improving a property and doing a cash out refinance on all 4 properties. And that will provide me enough, essentially, debt to put down payments on multiple other properties. I do have one that I'm going to try to get up in close to Dodge Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Family, friends, mom has a cabin up there. I actually grew up going to ski at it, and they don't use it anymore. So I know that market it's more of an Airbnb market than a hospital market, but it's
definitely is. Yeah. I got a place out there. So it does really well. It is like a really, really nice place. But if you do it the right way in those markets, you absolutely, especially during the winter, man.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't really have a winter here in California this year. I mean, it snowed for like 3 days.
Yeah.
Dumped like 10, 15 feet of snow. And we haven't had anything since. But yeah, it is a good market, especially if you enjoy the outdoors and you're able to enjoy it yourself. And then somebody else can essentially pay for the mortgage for you. I think those situations are a win-win. But there's a lot of potential. I was actually just looking at Miwok Village this morning, and there's some properties there that are really kicking ass, but they're like boho style. They're not even cabiny. They're like, it's essentially like a property that you would see in Berkeley that is moved to it doesn't have that cabin feel at all, which is essentially, that's what you want to go to when you go to places like that. But people are doing really well with, those like bungalow, boho type style homes in those markets. So that if you're going to do anything out there, I suggest you start thinking about, that kind of stuff. But that's awesome, man. 6 homes in one year. I think that's fantastic. So you're basically doing a BRRRR method, sounds like.
So that's how to really that's a whole nother real estate strategy, I guess. And I would not recommend it until you do some more turnkey kind of investments, even though the numbers with BRRRR are great, because you effectively, if you do it right, get all your money back. But it's also, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And going back to the first deal being important, because there's a lot of things that you don't know what you don't know, and you'll learn. And it's easier to learn when there's only a limited amount of stuff that can go wrong.
Right.
So I don't know. That's kind of that's what I have on the horizon. I do want to get like my real estate license and stuff just for my own knowledge and start wholesaling a little bit, because I have, with wholesaling, I could flick it to like, I know real estate enough and I have a big enough portfolio where people take me seriously and understand the numbers that I have, because I can show them.
Right.
And so I can either, if it doesn't meet my criteria, I can call up Jesse or someone else and say, hey, these are the numbers and I'm going to make 10 or 20,000 on it. And you're going to walk into 20 or 30,000 worth of equity, and it's a win-win. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And then if I want it, I have a strong enough income where I can just take it down myself with no competition, because it's not on the MLS. So that's that's another one of my like side things, but there's only so much time, and I'm learning. Even if I have 4 properties, and sure, there's multiple units on those properties, but working a full-time job, real estate is not easy, and it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of things that go wrong. I have to take phone calls. I was on a plane today, and right when I turned my phone off airplane mode, I had texts coming in related to a problem. A place wasn't cleaned enough, and there was dog hair all over still from the previous guest. That's not good. And it's not something that I want to deal with when I'm not, or even at the hospital sometimes. Stuff like that happens. So you have to have systems in place so that when things happen, I've never had like a fire when I'm at work, like an actual fire, burn a unit down when I'm at work or something horrific like that. But it's a lot of work. So that's what I'll caution everyone with, is like, there's a lot of reward and you make a lot of money, but it's not just like the stock market where you can kind of just like set it and forget it and wake up in 40 years and be a millionaire if you contributed regularly. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people always, it looks like you make a lot of money. You don't really do anything on, like Instagram and stuff. But at the end of the day, and I always tell people this, it's a lot of work. It's the reason why you're 2xing what you typically get through long term is because you're doing a lot of crap to get that money. You know what I mean? So it's not just, but the great thing about midterm rentals is that you do have a lot more passive income. A lot of times the nurses that are there, you don't even hear from them. It's just quiet. It's not like Airbnb. You don't deal with the turnover and all that stuff. You deal with the medical professionals, and they're just like, they work, come back, crash out, sleep, you repeat, same thing. And you really don't hear from them unless the house is burning down, or the kitchen, or there's a faucet or leaking or something like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So okay, cool.
That's something that I'll say really quick. Everyone always gets hesitant about like I invest across the country. There's a 3-hour time difference, and there's all this stuff that I have to consider. And when I tell people about it, because I talk about real estate investing all the time, they're like, well, what do you do when like there's a fire? And I was like, well, what have you done? You're 25 years old, we'll say. How many times is your house caught on fire? Or how many times is the pipes burst in the wall at your parents' house? Once, maybe once. That it's the same thing. Sure, if you have more rentals, there's a greater likelihood something like that happens, but that's an excuse. That's not a reason to not invest in real estate.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Yeah, a lot of people are always asking me like, how can you invest in something out of state or out of the area or out of the market? And a lot of gurus will actually say, don't buy anything out of state, start in your backyard. I actually disagree to that. I think that if you can do something across state lines or in a different time zone, the likelihood of you doing well in that, creating a system off that, is way better than if you were to do it in your backyard. It's going to be easier in your backyard. Yeah, you could get off work and drive somewhere. But if you can do it across state lines, and you could buy in these, we live in California, dude. It's like we can't buy stuff here that we would buy in North Carolina or even in Texas or, Kansas, some of these other states. And just the cash on cash return rates are much, they're a lot greater there, so it's doable. It's just you have to have a thick skin and learn the systems and learn how to do that. And that'll be another talk for another day. But cool, man. I appreciate you being here. One last thing before you take off. What was one of the biggest things you learned from taking the course that you did with me? Like, what is one thing that you could say, like, I really learned this from Jesse, and you're implying that now kind of going forward from taking the masterclass?
I would say definitely essentially reaching out to recruiters and travel agencies. That's something that I'm working on. I haven't gone as aggressively with that just because of my own time constraints, but utilizing Furnish Finder and Airbnb to get these travel nurses onboarded, because with where I am at, I don't have the time to deal with Airbnb turnover. I might be able to make a little bit more money, but realistically, because of my own situation, it's not worth my time to deal with the headache of Airbnb turnovers. I'd rather 2x what I could get in a long-term situation, have a travel nurse who I can relate to. And that's another thing that's unique for me is like,
Yeah.
one of my openers every time is like, oh, I'm a travel nurse too, so I provide amenities that I would want. And then
Yeah.
they automatically like that. And I automatically have an advantage over everyone else running in that market because I'm a traveler. So I have never met them. I said one thing and
There's a bond.
and sure, you know, I'm sure people can lie and do it, but ultimately
Right.
you can look up somebody's nursing license. It's not hard to do. So,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so that, you know, I essentially like Furnish Finder has been a great thing, setting your minimum stays to 30 days on Airbnb. I don't know
Yeah.
if I would do that. I would probably do like, for in my situation, like 10 or 14 days, because then you're not like excluding a ton of people.
Right.
But you're also not allowing like weekend stays. So I would say essentially Furnish Finder has been a huge thing. Reaching out to travel agencies and getting the direct connects is good if you're in the right market. Sometimes I think that if they don't have a demand, they just won't get back to you. But I also only reached out to one agency so far. So
We got to get you reaching out to more, man. We got to have you back in here after you get your contract or some connections with recruiters. One last question before I cut you loose, because
yeah.
now we're coming down to the hour. What are those amenities that you're looking for, and what do you provide in your property? So somebody that's starting now, they want to look at hosting travel medical professionals. What is something that you want when you're going into a property, which most nurses maybe want?
So I do blackout curtains. I have a smart TV. So one of the things that I think is big and it creates some headache, but it's worth it because you can charge more is I allow pets. So,
Yeah.
and my stuff is not apartment style or anything like that. I have a yard. A yard is big. And a fenced backyard, actually, that's very, very big. So I did that and it sure was a couple $1,000, but now I can charge a couple $1,000 extra because I have a yard. Nobody else has that. Pretty much anything in your market, go on Airbnb and look at the area and look at, you know, essentially look at what people are already offering and then offer more and
Yeah.
charge more.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree. The pet thing in the yard is really big. That's one of the nurses always ask me that all the time. Like, hey, is there space for my dog? Is there? And people are gonna, people care about their dogs more than they care about other people sometimes. So they want to bring their dogs and they want to have a space for the dog to run around. I literally just had a message from a travel nurse today, and she talked about that. Like, hey, does your house have a yard? Is it big enough for my dog to run around?
Mhm.
And that's true. Essentially, it really is. And you can charge more, and people are going to do that. So Connor, where can people find you if they wanted to look you up and talk to you or ask you any questions or anything? Do you have any where they can catch you at?
yeah, so you can add me on Facebook, just Connor Mather. And then my Instagram is the Connor Mather Way. I'm trying to create a little bit of a brand and I'm just starting out. So bear with me as I start to build that, but that's what it is for now. And it's CONNOR, not ER.
Got you. And we'll put all the information for Connor down in the show notes down below. And if you guys are watching this right now, you made it to the very end, please write #travel nursing on the bottom, and please like and subscribe this page. Connor, dude, thanks, man. I appreciate you for being here, shedding insight to everybody watching this now on what travel medical professionals look like and what they deal with on a regular basis, what those per diem rates look like. And then also you as an investor, you have that opportunity to be able to see these things in front of you, and you're taking advantage of them, man. So I'm super pumped to have you here, and I can't wait to see what you have going forward in the future. So thanks, man. I appreciate you being on here, and the show notes, everything will be on the bottom. Thanks,
Awesome.
Connor.
Thanks, Jesse.
Appreciate it, man.